Hey everybody, you're watching We the Fandom, where we discuss comic books, pop culture, and the fandom experience. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel to see more content. How's it going everybody? Jacob here at We the Fandom, and today's video will be my very first character explanation, with that character being the Sentry, aka Robert Reynolds. Now, the Sentry first appeared in Sentry number 1 in the year 2000, and he's one of, I'd say, 3 characters in Marvel that are generally called Marvel's version of Superman, and that's due to the bulk of his powers being almost completely similar. But his origin came about by Project Rebirth, which is a project that gave Steve Rogers his abilities and became Captain America. And in 1947, after the death of Captain America, in an attempt to recreate the super soldier formula, they also sought to magnify its effects 100 times over and were successful in doing so. Decades later, a lab would be broken into by Robert Reynolds, who at the time was a meth addict. He broke into the lab of an unnamed professor, and it was there that he discovered the Golden Sentry Serum. After consuming the compound, Robert Reynolds gained the power of which was called the power of 1,000,000 exploding suns, and then asked the professor to make more for himself so he can continue to use it and basically utilize his power to become a superhero. After having tested his abilities in a lab, he would go on to make a costume for himself and then become a very influential hero in Marvel Comics, meeting heroes such as Spider-Man, the Hulk, Iron Man, and Reed Richards during the beginning of their superhero careers, working alongside them and basically fighting off against big-name villains such as Doctor Doom. Now, this idea that the Sentry met Silver Age characters in the 60s, even though he wasn't created until the year 2000, is actually a major retcon in Marvel history, which I'll get into in a little bit. So during the golden age of the Sentry, he would end up sharing some of his power to gain the sidekick Scout, who had basically similar powers to him, and also marrying the love of his life, Lindy, a woman who was gladly swept up into the life of a member of the superhero community. During this time, however, Robert Reynolds started to notice the presence of the Void, which is basically this big shadowy monster, which at the time had some inexplicable connection to the Sentry and would go on to haunt him for years and years and years. It would turn out that the Void was the result of a mental virus implanted in him by the Sentry's archenemy, the General, and the Void would basically come out every time that the Sentry activated his powers. After battling the Hulk and ending the lives of over 1,000,000 people, Robert created a system with Reed Richards and Doctor Strange that would get rid of the Void, as well as purge all memories relating to the Sentry, thus creating that retcon that I mentioned earlier. The Sentry would later regain his memories, but this would also coincide with the return of the Void, and basically after that event, he has to be placed in the Raft, which, if you don't know, is basically a superhuman, supermax prison that's based off the coast of Manhattan. During his stay, the villain Electro would instigate a breakout during the beginning of the New Avengers story arc, which would lead to Sentry joining the New Avengers. He'd go on to have many adventures with the team, but end up siding with Iron Man against Captain America during the Civil War event, which I won't go too much into right now. I'll do another video on that some other time. But during the subsequent years, the Sentry would go on to struggle with the Void while trying to live a life as a protector of the Earth, which he, despite his struggle dealing with the Void, he ultimately believed himself to be the greatest protector of Earth, being the only one to be able to go toe-to-toe against the Hulk during the World War Hulk event. He fought alongside Norman Osborn during the Siege event, where he gave into the Void, and all the heroes and villains had to team up to stop him, including dropping an entire helicarrier on him. Years later, after struggling with his inner self and keeping his powers in check using a pocket reality where he could kind of play out his fantasy of being the Sentry without actually hurting anybody, Robert would merge with the Void, and he would kind of continue in this state into current stories, the latest of which saw him arrive as basically the last hope of the superheroes against Null the Symbiote God during the King in Black event. But as soon as he arrived, he was basically torn in half just as easily as he tore the god Ares in half during the Siege event. Now, getting into Sentry's powers, he has all the typical powers of Superman, such as super strength, flight, invulnerability, but also much greater, albeit uncontrollable powers, meaning he has very little control over when he can actually use them or the quality of that power at the time. But those powers include the ability to resurrect the dead, the ability to manipulate matter on an atomic level. He has some telekinesis and telepathy, and basically with all these abilities coalesce into one being, characters like Reed Richards and Tony Stark, I think Reed Richards has classified him as being the strongest superhuman on Earth, with Tony Stark postulating that he could be the strongest being in the entire universe. But that basically concludes my explanation of Robert Reynolds, aka the Sentry. Let me know what you guys thought of this video, and I'd also like to know what characters you would like to see explained in the future. So please leave your comments below. If you're new to We the Fandom, please hit that subscribe button, and if you enjoyed this video, please smash the like, and I'll see y'all next time.